Okay, our next topic is going to be the sex-linked pattern of inheritance. So we're going to talk a little bit about how some genes are on the X chromosome. So your task today, watch the screencast, which you're already doing. There's an ed puzzle on sex-linked pattern of inheritance. And then in quizzes, there are some practice problems. We're not going to do a ton of sex-linked inheritance problems, but in quizzes, there's a variety of some things that we've done just to kind of give you a sense. I think there's like 16 problems. If you're struggling with any of these or if you have questions, please give me a call or you can send an email. We can set up a Zoom. We can go through any of them together. But just remember, there's not a test on this, but we're just trying to get you to practice. So I'm going to go back we're on slide 55, and this is where we start talking about our chromosomes again. And our chromosomes, we have 23 pairs, homologous pairs. And so you always just inherit two copies of an allele, one from your mom, one from your dad, and they're on each chromosome. But when we get down to this last pair, they're known as our sex chromosomes. That's your X and Y chromosomes or your X and X chromosomes. So the mother's sex chromosomes, the mother has two X chromosomes, and the father has an X and a Y. So if you would put this into a Punnett square, you would see that the possible offspring are going to be 50% would have XX and 50% would have XY. And that's where you actually are going to probably say, well, okay, what's the difference? Well, the difference is that having two X chromosomes means you have all of this genetic information and you have it twice. Whereas if you have a Y chromosome, you actually are missing a lot of genetic information. So sometimes I say that explains a few things about men. But anyways, the one thing that the Y chromosome does have is it has a gene that's called the testes determining factor. And that gene obviously determines that testes are going to be created. And so remember, testes are the male organ that produces testosterone, and that's where sperm are made. So males have that chromosome instead of having another X chromosome. So this is a list of all of the genes they're actually not a list of all of the genes. This is a list of some of the genes on the X chromosome that if they have the recessive allele of this gene, then that causes a genetic disorder. So some examples of sex-linked disorders that you'll hear about: Duchenne muscular dystrophy, color blindness, and hemophilia. Some of these other ones are not as common. So what I have for you here is just an example of a Punnett square for colorblind. So two normal visioned parents produce a colorblind son. What are the genotypes of the parents? What is the chance of their next child being a colorblind daughter? So if we know the parents are normal vision, we have to set up a key. This is a time where you have to use the X and the Y and use the letter as a superscript. So since the father is normal, there's only two possible genotypes for males. Males either could have the dominant allele or they have the recessive allele. Since they don't have two copies of it, they can never be heterozygous. So we know this must be the father's genotype. The mother is normal, but she has a son who has the recessive allele. So what we can think about here is this is a possibility of a female who's homozygous dominant. She has both normal copies. This is an example of a female who has one dominant allele and one recessive allele. We call those carriers. So far you've probably heard of like heterozygous, hybrid, carriers. They're all talking about having one of each allele. And then finally, this is a female who's colorblind, pretty rare, but she has two recessive alleles. So if we had to try to work this Punnett square out, we put the father here who is normal. This is a mother who's normal, but it's carrying the recessive allele, and it shows you that she could have a colorblind son. But go back to the question, could she have a colorblind daughter? And the answer is no, she could not. So why are sex-linked disorders more common in males than in females? Mainly because males only have to inherit one copy of the recessive allele to have the disorder. All right, so our next topic after this will be going into pedigree charts, and that's going to be tomorrow, actually 2 days from now. So if you want to practice some genetics, go into quizzes and do some practice problems.